Hello, everybody, and welcome to another day at Live at the Waterhole. My name is Taylor McCurdy, and I am so excited to be here today. I will be hosting you all the voice that you'll hear for the next couple of hours. And if this is your first time joining, welcome. This is a live and interactive safari. Yes, you heard me. This is happening right now in South Africa and more of the northwestern parts of the country, a game reserve called Madikwe. So these are all live waterhole cameras where we sit and we watch wildlife as it comes through. And thankfully, that summer is upon us. The days are extremely warm, which draws most of the wildlife to, well, some pools of water that are a bit cleaner than this one. But as you can see, it's perfectly suited for elephants. If you're wondering, Taylor, you didn't tell us how we can talk to you or how we can send our questions and comments. I'm going to get there, I promise. But all you have to do is head over to the WildEarth website and use the question box option there, and you can send on anything through. But this is always a great opportunity to have the volume on your TV or your computer screen or tablet or phone, however you're watching, turned up nice and loud so you can hear these elephants splashing themselves with the mud. Stefan, you said good morning. Nice to have you joining us, Stephen. Today it's great to have you. I am looking forward to your questions. For those of you that are wondering, there are some die-hard live at the Waterhole fans, which makes me really happy because I get to chat to all of you all the time. And Stephen is one of them. He regularly comments. So I'm looking forward to the regulars. You always come up with great questions. And for those of that are new, I can't wait to hear what you have to ask. And I hope that you're able to learn something new today. But this is a scene that we typically see at Jamala, which is, like I said, one of the waterhole cameras in Madikwe Game Reserve, and it's just filled with elephants all day long. We're going to keep this view nice and tight, and once these elephants kind of move off, then I'll show you what the entire camera looks like. But you're just going to have to wait and see. Um, but this is great. They're not really doing too much. You know, it's nice to see them, two of these elephants just really settled in and soaking up the sun, and as well as feeling that nice cool mud on their skin. When you're the size of an elephant walking around on the open plains, you can only imagine how hot you would get. And there's not that many big trees around here, which we'll see a bit later. But anyway, speaking of the heat and the weather, let's go check out what it's like at the registered locations. Here we go. Here's a slightly wider view. So lots of elephants all spread out. There's some breeding herds with or some adult cows and their youngsters, and then there's quite a few bulls too. And this waterhole is just going to be very busy today. There's even a zebra. We often see buffalo. I think I can see a buffalo with its head behind a bush. warthogs come down, the wildebeest. There's even an impala now on the other side. Maybe we can have a look at the impala while it's here, as I don't think it's going to stick around for too long. And there we go. He's also stretched his legs out, not quite like a giraffe though. Just having a quick drink before moving off. The impala don't always spend a lot of time around the water, not like the animals with thicker skin that tend to roll around in it. They'll just really pop through, quench their thirst, and then go and try and cool themselves in other ways. For example, standing under a shady tree is one of the easiest ways to do that. And as we pan across, look at how many more elephants just start to reveal themselves, and there's two young elephant bulls interacting with one another. This is very, very peaceful, very friendly. You know, one elephant's got his trunk up on the other, kind of just investigating around, but for the moment being quite gentle with one another. This, of course, can change as bulls are boisterous and like to push and shove one another around, especially at this age. Tessa, you've wondered which animals can last the longest without water. Well, there's quite a few different animals that don't have to drink water every single day. Elephants need to drink regularly, and in fact, if they can drink more than once a day, they absolutely will. So, there are some mammal species that specifically live in desert or very arid environments. And they've come up with ways to be able to kind of firstly combat the heat, so stay nice and cool, but then also to retain water so that they don't have to drink it every single day. So something like a gemsbok, or maybe you know it as an oryx, they're able, and even a giraffe, in fact, they get a lot of moisture from the food that they are feasting on. You'll also find a lot of mammals that are feeding on, say, ants and termites. So if we use aardvark and pangolins for an example, they also don't have to drink water very often at all, and can go for long periods. Again, they're getting all the moisture requirements that they need from whatever they may be eating. Let's go. We get some animals that we call water dependent animals, and we actually have seen two of them already. We saw the impala and the zebra, and they don't move around and away from water for very long periods. In fact, they have to drink once a day. So you might find, I think the textbooks say it's about a 5 kilometer radius that they'll kind of move around from a permanent water source, or at least, or somewhere where they can kind of drink water. But again, give or take, that's kind of just an estimation. But so yeah, so they'll need to kind of stay close by, and then you can move into some of the reptile species. They don't have to drink typically on a regular occasion, and even some species of birds. For example, have you ever seen a hornbill drinking water? No, you have not, because they don't drink water. In fact, how crazy is that? Some Southern Ground Hornbill researchers, some mates of mine mentioned that to me, and I went, huh. Now that you think about it, in the just over 11 years that I've been in the industry for, I've never seen a hornbill drink. And I thought that was quite fascinating. So there's lots and lots of different animals out there. Oh, look at the two little elephant calves. Shh, elephants, we're trying to look at the small ones. Some jealousy, clearly. This is such a wonderful scene, though. I love it. I say it every day. I love this camera so much. It's my favorite camera, which we'll probably have a look at a little bit later after 12. Is it 12 o'clock? When the Africam cameras join, there's one that I love. But in the last couple of weeks, Jamala has become my absolute favorite. And yesterday, I was commenting on about how much of this water in this pan has disappeared from evaporation because it's so hot, and then from all the animals drinking it. So they really need to try and they can only pump so much water. That's where all the elephants are drinking in the middle. There's a little pump there, a little pipe, and pushing out borehole water, so water that's come from the ground. But when this area desperately needs a good amount of rain, maybe like 40 or my goodness, 40 or 50 mils of rain, and that will top this up quite nicely, just in addition to the water that's being pumped here. That is a very high pitched, it wasn't even a trumpet. And that was most certainly from a young elephant. Look at them. They're all just doing their own thing.
Cheetahs are one of nature's prolific gems. Jump on safari as we celebrate International Cheetah Day. Alongside an interview with the woman who established International Cheetah Day, Dr. Laurie Marker, we will search for cheetahs live across Africa and share some of our best cheetah sightings from over the years. Join us for our cheetah chase. WildEarth, keeping up with the fastest land mammal on Earth.
There's a little bit more action now. Some of the elephants not just standing still, having a rest, and two very brave impala and one zebra just off to the right. There was a group of zebra that was slowly making their way down, but they're just taking their time as they always do. They take forever to get to the waterhole. Another impala. Nobody hassling them just yet, but watch how nervous they are. You see this impala ewe, she's going to realize that she doesn't have much of a gap now to get away. If that bull comes straight towards her, whee, look at that. Did you see that big leap into the air? So impala are they're just phenomenal antelope, and a lot of people overlook them, especially if you're from South Africa, you've gone on a safari a lot. That everyone kind of goes, "Oh, we don't want to stop and have a look at the impala." However, they're extremely athletic, and that big leap that you just saw, that's one of the evasive maneuvers that they'll use if they're being chased by predators. And sometimes they'll even just jump around and just to show if there are predators nearby, like, look at how healthy I am, look at how fit I am, kind of displaying, showing off, to try and deter them, from basically chasing them. But of course, we know how that kind of goes. But that was a really narrow gap. And the last thing that she would have wanted was to have had to have jumped into the water. Well, of course, if she absolutely had to, she would, but they just like to get the tips of their hooves wet and nothing really else. Okay, and it looks like that Impala U right at the back. So we call the females U's, E-W-E, U. I don't even know. U. English is a strange language. She look like she's pregnant. I mean, that one looks like an adult. These two here in front look like they might be uh, ewes from last season, youngsters from last season. See, they just look a lot more slight and they don't have big bellies. But the impala females are actually giving birth at the moment. A lot of animals are. So I'm surprised that we haven't seen any young, well, I haven't seen any young lambs yet at this waterhole. Marula shortcake. Hello, I hope you're well. You've asked, do impala females mate with the same dominant male within the harem? Uh, so yes, they would. However, this is it's quite stressful for the impala, especially the rams, because once they've decided on their territory, right? So impala are not territorial all year round, well, the males. But during breeding season, what we call the rut, so gearing up to when they start mating, the males will kind of disperse a bit more, and then they'll start sort of scent marking. They normally will defecate in a specific pile and consistently use that dung pile, and they'll vocally declare their territories. Now, depending on where your territory is, me, Marula Shortcake, I've always got to go the long way around with everything here. So, depending on where their territory is, that's going to determine how much traffic they're going to be receiving from other female impalas passing through and other male impalas wanting to take their position. So, if there's a territory that's fairly close to the water's edge or in a good spot where there's grazing and water nearby, you kind of get the point. Everybody wants a house on the beach, right? Um, that's going to be prime location. That means that that male impala is going to be challenged a lot more, and he's going to get tired. He's not really eating because he's constantly herding and trying to mate with the females and keep them within his space. So those males tend to get knocked out quite quickly. And they might only stay there for 10 days, 2 weeks if they're lucky, maybe even a bit longer. So it's possible that it's not just the same male that ends up mating with a specific group of females. It could also be another male. So that's where I was going with that long story. But those two elephants that looked like they were fighting, it looks like two elephant bulls, and different behavior from what we saw just a moment ago. We had one elephant with his on top of the other individual's head. Now, I don't think it's the same two. It could be, but I really didn't take note of any specific identifying features, and I was looking at all sorts of other things. Oh, look there. So a bit of a tussle between the two young bulls, and now the bull on the left taking a bit of his frustration out onto that cow and that calf. But he better watch himself, because if one of those cows turns around and eventually tells him right to get out of here, he's going to get a hiding. Now there's some bigger bulls that have come into the scene. Maybe we can have a closer look. And he's going to be put into his place now. Okay, it seems like things have kind of settled down and those bulls have dispersed. But as you saw, the older bull came through and just reminded everybody there that he's actually bigger than the two of them and they better stop their nonsense. And then he just bulldozed through and carried on walking up the pathway. So here's a male impala, a ram with his females, all looking for a little gap. The impala seem to be quite separated. I haven't seen like one big herd coming down to drink, but maybe with the pressure of the other animals around the edge of the waterhole, they are just coming in drips and drabs.
It's a festive Wilderland. Come along as we go in search for various festive wild animals for the 12 days of Christmas. From honking geese and roaring lions to hooting owls and leaping leopards. Tune in on your nearest device and join the festive fun. Watch the live show from the 14th to the 25th of December. Don't miss out. Embrace the festive season with WildEarth.
Ooh, Stephen, thank you, thank you. This is a great question you've asked. Do elephants ever show any courtship behavior before mating? Well, I suppose that you could call, um, well, maybe not courtship, but yesterday I was discussing it just very briefly. When the females are in estrus, they do a specific kind of rumble that is called the estrus song. So they're pretty much putting feelers out there into the environment, going, hey, are there any strong, big, tall, long tusked elephants, that are in the area? No, I'm just joking. That's not really what happens, but I suppose sort of, but I anthropomorphized terribly there, sorry. And then those bulls will kind of start moving into the area if they pick up on a scent. And it's quite a thing watching elephants mate. But what you quite often see is like you'll see an elephant bull put his trunk over the top of a female on her back and kind of rest his head there for a little bit. And if she doesn't stand still, it's going to be very difficult for the male to mount her. The other thing is also that the males are exceptionally large in comparison to the females. So both have got to kind of play ball. Um, but I can't say that there's maybe a specific kind of courtship, like, does it go on for a few days before they eventually mate? I'm not actually sure. And I can't say that I've ever come across it before, but you know what, Stephen, that's not necessarily something that I've ever researched before. So let me see if there's any kind of literature to that. There is going to have to be some kind of courtship, like I said, whether it's a trunk on the back and maybe a couple of little moments together. Perhaps they walk around. She's not interested. I mean, it's like with rhinos, for example. It can take a day or two or a couple of days before a female will eventually let the male rhino mate with her. He can mount her a number of different times, but not mate successfully until she's actually, compliant. So that's I suppose something that would happen maybe with elephants too. It's also just with elephants being so big and so much bigger than the females, they can also throw their weight around. But let me have a quick Google. I'm going to search that now, Stephen. So, Stephen, I just quickly had a look. I mean, it wasn't a thorough investigation, but they pretty much just talk about what I was mentioning. If you did miss the question, Stephen asked, do elephants perform any kind of courtship before mating? So no, just I suppose like with a lot of animals, the running around, the trying to coax the female, whether it's, like I said, trunk over her body, maybe on top of her head, or rubbing up against her, something along those lines. And it can take a little while. I don't think there's any set period either. I think it's going to depend on the individuals. And then there was another question, but I didn't hear the name correctly. I just want to make sure I get it right. Yanku, there we go. Yanku, you're wondering how fast can elephants run, and is it faster than a hippo? So, uh, again, all elephants are going to run at a slightly different speed, right? They don't all run exactly at the same speed. And it's the same thing with humans, depending on your athletic ability, right? And not one elephant is the same as the other. They're all completely different. But the average is around 40 kilometers an hour. So that's quite fast if you think about it. And I know it doesn't sound very quick, right? We talk about cheetah, running up to just over 100 kilometers an hour, and you think 40 kilometers an hour, what does that even mean? But when you're in a car and you're reversing and your foot is flat on the reverse pedal, it's very quick. You won't believe it. You think you can't, you wish that the vehicle could reverse even quicker than that. Hippos, sorry, however, aren't able to run as fast, and they run at about 30 kilometers an hour or so. Again, it depends. I reckon if a hippo was going downhill into the water, they might clock 35 kilometers an hour. But who am I to judge? Because I don't sit there. How would you even test that? Now that I'm thinking about it, you get them to run past traffic cops that have got their, those speedometer trapping things out. I don't know how they organize that. That's quite entertaining. I actually want to research. Hope there's some video footage of how they estimate the speed of elephants. Or this is just collectively people that have been charged by elephants and hippos or try to keep up with them and then check their speedometers. I'm just joking, of course. I have no idea how they would have done that test, but I think it's quite funny. Oh, look there. The elephants are having a trunk wrestle. There's the two youngsters at the back. That's a interesting technique. It's the equivalent, I suppose, of an arm wrestle. Let's have a closer look at these three bulls in the background that are having a three-way tug of war. Come on, elephant on the left, get your trunk in there too. TJ, you've said that you think that it sounds like the elephants are in pain when they vocalize, or sometimes when they vocalize. I can get that, right? If you and I were to try and make that noise, it would be if we put our hand in hot fire, we accidentally touched the stove, we slammed your fingers in the door. That's normally how we would produce a similar sound, right? Uh, but with elephants, that's like not always the case. I suppose actually, let's think of children playing in a playground, right? Loud. There's no playground that you'll ever go to where it's silent, right? Kids are screaming and yelling, but it doesn't always mean that they're in pain. It's just excited. So those screams that are sort of deeper, that bellowing call, that's kind of like I'm frustrated, leave me alone. I didn't like what you just did, or you hurt me. And then you get the really high pitched ones, and you can really tell a young elephant from an older elephant. And the higher pitch they are, it's normally from a younger elephant. That could be, mom doesn't want to let me suckle, so I'm throwing a tantrum. uh, I it might be an excited scream too. So it can be a number of different things. But those vocalizations are not made through the trunk; those are made through its mouth. So slightly different. Obviously, when you hear that trumpet, that's being produced through the trunk. And I've got an obstacle to fight over. Do you remember the show Gladiators? I used to watch it when I was a child. This little elephant in front, and then they'd fight one another with, I don't even know what you call those things. Like looks like a stick with marshmallows on the end of each side, and bash one another while they're walking across a beam. That's what it reminds me of. There we go. So that is like a young elephant not getting its way. Can you hear that bird in the background? That's all going. That is a black cuckoo. That's a really great bird to hear. It would be nice if you could see one. Elephant on the left. Are you giving up or are you going to go back again? So, elephants fighting like this, it's like I said, it's not anything serious. These bulls are really young. They're not going to be spending much time with the herds anymore. They've definitely moved on. And it's important that they find other younger elephants that are in a similar situation, and they'll kind of join up and stick together and normally find a really big experienced bull to follow around, and they sort of will learn from him. But the constant jostling that you'll see between the younger individuals is important. They need to learn their status within the hierarchy of bulls and understand their place. And if this kind of pushing and shoving doesn't go on, not so much with these two youngsters, of a similar age and size, but with much bigger bulls, it causes huge problems. And one of the other nature wilderness areas just outside of Johannesburg called Pilanesberg, they had this problem where they didn't have any big dominant bulls, and they had quite a few numbers of younger elephant bulls that were coming into must much earlier than they should have. So by having the bigger dominant bulls, he just got kicked. Um, Having the bigger dominant bulls, it and when let me use the word bully, right? We can't really use the word bully because we're anthropomorphizing with animals. But when an older bull asserts its dominance over a younger one, it's going to suppress that state of must. Must typically comes about when elephant bulls are sexually mature. It doesn't mean that they have the right to mate, though. It still means that they've got a lot of growing to do and a lot to learn before they're going to have the rights to mate with the females, especially if the bigger, older bulls are around. Um, so, so it's really interesting. And Pilansberg had this problem, and you had these young bulls that were so frustrated. They were mounting rhinos, breaking their backs, they were wreaking all kinds of havoc, not just because they didn't know what to do with themselves. So that kind of behavior is super important. And then the bigger bull on the left, he's just having a scratch between his legs, getting all those hard to reach places.
Are you WildEarth's biggest fan? Then our Fan of the Month is a competition for you. Join our naturalists on Safari Live and listen out for weekly questions. To enter the competition, head over to our Instagram, search #WildEarthFan, and comment your answer under the post. The monthly winner will be determined by the total quickest and most correct answers, and will win a private virtual safari. We announce our winner at the end of every month. Tune in to Safari Live daily. WildEarth, it's in your nature.
Everything is starting to settle down nicely. At least the elephant cows have an opportunity to drink some of the fresher water that's coming out of the pipe rather than being bossed around by all the big bulls. That's when we tend to hear a lot more vocalizations, is when the bulls are around and just throwing their weight about and pushing and shoving. And sometimes the youngsters will not be too impressed. They might even get knocked over, not necessarily on purpose, but they just don't really seem to care about anything else around them. You know that saying, a bull in a china shop? That's pretty much an elephant bull all the time. Bro, you have asked a wonderful question. You're wondering, how can somebody without any experience tell if the fight is serious? That's a really good, and I suppose it can be quite difficult. But if you think about uh, watching a boxing match, boxing game, what do you call it? What do you call it when you watch boxing? Like you watch a sports match or a rugby game. Anyways, my apologies. I don't know what you call it when you watch boxing. Apparently, I've been told boxing match. I have no idea. But anyways, um, you've right. You see the two chaps or two women, they're in the ring and they are belting one another. Bah, 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 one, two, jab, all that type of thing. It's serious. They're trying to hit each other as hard as possible. That's what elephants are going to do. Any animal, it's going to be exceptional. They are going to butt heads and it's going to be hard. You're going to hear those tusks clashing. Sometimes it sounds like a gunshot. You're going to see them, lots of dust being kicked up. They're going to hit one another's bodies. So for example, what we've been seeing, this is all sparring, and sparring can even get a little bit rougher from what we've seen. But just think of it; it's the most extreme. Animals in general won't fight aggressively, like to the point where they're really going to hurt one another, unless they absolutely have to. That might mean maybe there is. I'm just using the broad scale here, not specific to any animal. This could mean that maybe. There are other male of that specific species coming into the area and perhaps they're territorial, right? And they want to challenge them for their territory, whatever the case may be. It might be for mating rights, or even just self-defense, right? If some other and other intruders come through and they really have to defend themselves, but otherwise they're not going to fight seriously. So gosh, I don't even know when I last saw two elephant bulls having a proper fight. It's been years and years, and it's not something that you get to see all the time. So this is these youngsters pushing and shoving one another. We see this a lot, almost on a daily basis if you're with elephants, and especially if we're with elephants around a waterhole, they can't help themselves. Um, but um, but yeah, that's something quite sacred to see is two elephant bulls having big fights. If you go onto Google or onto YouTube or something, you can Google it or just search for it. Say two elephant bulls fighting, and then just try and find something that um, looks like what I've just described. So today we've seen two tiny little elephants. There's the one, and there was another one a little while ago. Oh, wait, look, there's new life. What's that? Is that a kudu just up and to the left of the elephant? Let's see if we can get a better look. Wow, isn't he gorgeous? Quite an impressive individual. He's got a beautiful splay of horns, but not looking as muscly and as big as kudu bulls can typically get. And again, just before breeding starts with kudu, my goodness, it's almost like they double in size with their body weight. The muscle just piles on. They're stunning. That neck, like look at his neck now. His neck's actually quite slim. It'll almost get twice the thickness that it is. The other thing is that he could still maybe he might be a slightly older individual, and that maybe he's starting to lose condition. I'm just looking at his horns, and they are quite impressive. But we are just coming out of dry season though, and it's very arid in this area. So that does take an effect. Well, it does take its toll on the wildlife, and they can lose condition quite quickly. And quite often, that's one of the reasons why animals just don't make it after the winters, is because they can be so harsh and so dry. And if you have got anything compromising your immune system, even old age, you're going to feel the effects of it. Yellow duck, you said, what do naturalists mean when they say you can communicate with animals? How do you do it? And do some animals need more communication from us than others? I don't know. Some people call themselves lion whisperers, leopard whisperers, and elephant whisperers. I'm not such a fan of those kinds of terms. I mean, elephants, for an example, they're highly intelligent, right? And they share a lot of emotions, or can feel a lot of emotions that we as humans can kind of feel. Um, they've got long-term memory. So, in comparison to a lot of other animals, they're more highly intelligent. But I mean, I can't stand an elephant and have a conversation with it, right? So, if it is going to learn anything, it's going to be through repetition, just like how you would train a dog, for an example. Obviously, we will not be training or interacting with any of these elephants out here in the wild spaces. Um, but I'm wondering, for an example, maybe this could also be what you mean. I'll use myself as an example. Anyone really that encounters elephants on a regular basis. For the most part, we're seeing them while we're in a vehicle. And because, well, I've been in the industry for a little bit of time now, I can understand a lot of elephant behavior. So I know what to expect. Sometimes it's unexpected, and because things can change just like that, and I think people forget that sometimes. So I can't communicate with an elephant directly, but if an elephant bull is walking down the road and he's got that swagger and he just looks like he's going to come and cause some trouble, like for example, I don't want him to tower over the top of me. And I actually talk about this a lot in sightings when something like this is going to happen. And I love doing it with students, with people who are training to become safari guides, because it's important for them to see. And what I would normally show to the students is, look what you can do with just using your voice. You can do one of two things, right? You can, or three things. You can sit quietly and let the elephant do whatever it wants to do and come up to the vehicle. The second thing is that you can acknowledge the elephant, right? You can say to the elephant when it gets to a certain point, um, like your comfort space. So, hello, boy. You can say spaghetti, noodle, chili paste, whatever you want, Dorito. Like it doesn't really matter, to get his attention. It's almost like to say, "Oh, hey, acknowledge what you're about to do," and you see them, and they stop and they go, "Been caught." my plan of sneaking up to these people and intimidating them completely ruined. And it's really funny to actually watch that. And then sometimes you might need to, if they keep coming closer and you don't want them to come closer, obviously you can start the car and move away. But again, you have to be careful with young elephant bulls because it could teach them to chase cars. It's very complicated. There's a lot of different scenarios. It's difficult to just give a blanket answer for anything. And then sometimes you might have to be like a little bit more stern. So that's the third scenario, right? You can sit quietly, you can tell the elephant in a nice manner, calm manner. It doesn't matter what you say. Maybe even put your hand up and move it around just so that they acknowledge you. Or if it gets to the point where they're being quite boisterous and they're coming at the car, you might have to do a hey, or a bang the side of the car, something like that. For the most part, we don't really have to do that, but there are times where you need to assert your aggression a little bit more towards something like an elephant to stop them from coming over. So yeah, so it just really kind of depends. But I can't really just sit there and be like, hey, elephant, I don't think it's a great idea if you come over to this vehicle because there's a couple of people in the back and they're really scared of elephants. And even though I know you mean well, it's not going to have any idea what I'm talking about. But it's just hearing the voice, and I definitely think they can understand tone. Um, there are new studies that are being done on elephants, though, in East Africa, which is quite interesting. There's still a lot of research that needs to be done on this, but it's been suggested that elephants are able to understand, I suppose, maybe accents, and this comes in with one tribe in East Africa, the Maasai, and then I forget the other tribe's name, but typically Maasai tribes, they're made up of warriors, right? They're the protectors. So there's quite often a lot of interactions between the warriors and wild animals, whether it's predators or even big animals like elephants, for an example. So these animals come to learn that they don't have a particularly nice or peaceful relationship with the Maasai tribes. Of course, this is not everywhere, but this is what the research is kind of showing. And they did this study with herds of elephants, and elephants would hear people speaking in Ma, which is the Maasai language, and all of a sudden their behavior would change. They'd move close together, their ears would flare out, their heads would be slightly raised, they'd move their tails away from their body as kind of like more agitated, more on alert. And then with another tribe, and I apologize, I completely forget which tribe it was, where they have a more peaceful relationship with wild animals. These elephants didn't care that the people were nearby, and they just carried on. They didn't change their behavior whatsoever. So there's a lot more studies on going on in that term. So whether or not, I don't think they're necessarily able to understand exactly what they're saying, but I think that they can differentiate between different accents. And there's amazing studies also going on with regards to bioacoustics. Some of you probably never even heard that word before. And a lot of the studies are actually looking on orcas or killer whales. And again, it's been suggested now that each female orca has her own, like with us, her own accent, her own different dialect, and she's able to communicate that to her calf, and her calf kind of picks that up too. And and I just think that that's so fascinating. So it's not just a general communication; they speak in different ways. They've all got slightly different vocalizations from one another. So all these different studies are going to come to light, and this is thanks to the progression of technology. So this truly, yeah, really amazes me. I must find this. Let me have a quick look. There's a podcast of a scientist, and she talks about bioacoustics. Her name is Dr. Karen Backer. I think it's Bakker. And if you put Dr. Karen Bakker, bioacoustics, you can actually have a listen to some of her stuff. It might be something nice, again, if you're going on a long road trip or something like that, to put on in the background if you're interested in wildlife and just understanding, yeah, the communications. Even with bioacoustics, they're starting to understand what frequencies are missing, I suppose, within the environment, and they are able to figure out what species used to be around but are now no longer there. So it's fascinating stuff. Another question from Stephen. Thank you so much. You have said it is fascinating to see how elephant mothers reprimand their calves. Um, and it's sometimes it's not even their calves, you know. So adults will reprimand other individuals within the herd too. I suppose it's kind of taboo with humans, right? It's like don't feed my children or my animals without my, without asking, and also please don't discipline them. Um, that's not really how it goes in an elephant herd. They're also closely related and they're consistently interacting with one another all the time. That if one individual steps out of line and an older elephant is there, they will reprimand them. Of course, if there's a discrepancy about who was reprimanded and how it was done, then you're going to find maybe some more conflict between some of the other females, perhaps. But when a serious reprimanding is done, you'll and I've seen this with young bulls and young cows, they get pushed right over onto their sides, and it's kind of like they get. I mean, I think they get verbal hidings, if I can say that, right, where they get trumpeted at and shouted at and all sorts of, I'm sure, different frequencies. But then they also, when it's serious, it does become quite physical. And when an younger elephant is pushed onto its side like that, that's serious. Whatever it has done, it's a behavior that is not tolerated within the herd. And and it's obviously important that they learn that way. And you can also understand if you see that kind of behavior. It's not something you see all the time, but bulls, as they grow up, would typically be shown uh, that kind of reprimanding more regularly. And can you imagine how unpleasant that must get? Like it almost would seem like nothing I do is right, and and eventually you're just not going to want to stay there anymore, and you'll eventually move off. And that's really what happens with the bulls. The cows just become less tolerant of them and their boisterousness, and basically, right, you can stay here and you're going to constantly have a go at you all the time, or you can move on and then just be pushed and shoved around by other elephant bulls. So they never win. But it's been a wonderful hour and a bit with the elephants. Let's head over to Ajuma in the Sabi Sand and see what creatures are lurking about. Oh, look at this nice close view. Now you'll notice that the camera is shaking a little bit. It's just because it's windy, and we've had to zoom in to be able to get this exceptional view. Hi, little lambs. So these are the young impala lambs that I was talking about earlier. There's so many of them. Oh, this is wonderful. Some of them all, you see them all cuddled up together in the sun, forming a bit of a creche. If you were watching yesterday, well, I was actually speaking about young animals forming little social groups. We call them creche, while, most of the adults would move away and feed. There's a little bit of picture breakup here and there, a bit of glitching. So I do apologize for that. Hopefully it will rectify itself sooner rather than later. But while we wait for this to be sorted out, let's go back to Jamala. Well, there we go. Sorry about that, everyone. I mean, elephants do not want us to stop watching them. Fair enough. It is really nice to just see how peaceful it is as this bull moves through. Look how big he is. Goodness gracious. So here's a really good example if you were watching yesterday, and I've spoken about this a few times, and I'm sure the other naturalists have done the same. Just looking at how to sort of age elephants and looking at this bull that's standing on the left, he's the one towering over all the others. Looking at his body is huge. His front legs don't look like they're out of proportion. They don't look like they're too long. And his head is enormous. Look at the size, the width of his trunk. This shows me this is a big, mature elephant bull in comparison to the other individuals that we have been seeing. Oh yeah. And look at you. You can compare him to the bull that's just moving away to the right of him. Long, lanky legs, a small head, and his body is still relatively small as well. He hasn't quite grown into himself or filled out just yet. So I hope that helps. If you've been trying to see what I'm talking about, that was actually quite a nice example to see the two of them standing so close to one another. You can see that bull with a broken tusk. His head is much smaller than the rest of his body. He was being told to move out of the way by another bull. Ah, Catherine, hello. You've asked, have I ever seen an elephant giving a birth? Not where it has the calf has survived. When I was in the Eastern Cape a very, very long time ago, there was an elephant cow that gave birth, but she gave birth to a stillborn. And I kind of, as I got there, it all just sort of happened. So I didn't, I got there just for the action. It was very sad. So that's what I see. But otherwise, I've never ever sat and watched an elephant giving birth. Just trying to think. Jamie, who is was also one of the Wild Earth naturalists a long time ago, when I was also working for Wild Earth permanently, she had an incredible sighting in the Mara. I just forget if she watched this elephant cow give birth or if she just arrived there and the cow had also given birth. It was very sad, though. This calf's umbilical cord was stuck on a blade of grass and couldn't end up suckling. It was a very sad scene. So yeah, so I don't think we've actually ever had it live either, an elephant giving birth. But I stand to be correct. If there is anybody that has been following Wild Earth slash Safari live for years and years now and been watching the sunset and the sunrise safaris, let me know. But gosh, that's really just right place at the right time. Oh, let's have a look. Can we look at the elephants that are just above this crowd at the bottom? I want to watch that tiny little elephant that's just venturing into the mud. It's so cute. Tell me that that's not the most adorable thing you've seen all day long. Doesn't know what it's doing the shimmy shuffle and the helicopter with its trunk. Two classic dance moves, well, elephant dance moves. And now we're going down for a bit of a boogie. Oh, that's a very impressive move. I don't think I could do that. When you're this young, everything feels good, right? You can flop down in the sand and roll around. You can do the same thing in the grass. And when it's in the water and in the mud, it's just that much better. But that's the technique for a young elephant to mud bath. Not really able to toss much mud over itself. So just get down and dirty. And it looks like it's doing a bit of ice skating now, slipping and sliding as it tries to climb up. Oh, that was fantastic. That's my highlight of the show so far.
Africam's YouTube channel delivers daily doses of enchanting wildlife moments. Experience highlights captured live from our cameras to stay informed about the wildlife action. Dive into the immersive world of Africam's YouTube membership community. Engage in live chats, express yourself with custom emojis and badges, and unlock exclusive behind-the-scenes content. Subscribe to Africam's YouTube channel today and become part of a wildlife-loving community.
The water holes to make sure that the water is safe. So, in an ecosystem like this, in Madikwe, which is what we call a closed ecosystem, so it's completely fenced off. The animals aren't able to leave the reserve and move into other areas, unless they try really hard. Um, so then, yes, it's the responsibility of the reserve to do so here. Um, because the rivers don't flow all year round and in so many different places, and a lot of this has got to do with agriculture. Farmers just drawing water to water crops or whatever the case kind of maybe create their own dams, that type of thing. So there's not always a lot of free flowing water available. And that's, of course, if even the particular reserves or ecosystems have rivers in them. So pools of water like this that we're looking at can become quite putrid at an alarming rate. And that's because, especially during dry season, when there's no rain at all, well, unlikely to have rain during the dry months, all the feces, all the urine, or all the natural occurring bacteria are just going to constantly, or the bacteria will just keep producing the quantities of them. The levels will get much higher, and because there's no new water like replenishing it just becomes quite stagnant. And then yes, they're talking about blue-green algae, which is not actually an algae at all. It's called cyanobacteria, one of the oldest organisms on this planet. And if those algal blooms form, that can end up killing animals. It's harmful to them in high concentrations. But that comes about when there's stagnant water. So yes, so that's why a lot of these pans will be topped up, like where these elephants are standing just in the center of the screen. There's a pipe there, and they're drinking water from it. It's difficult for these pumps, though, to replenish the water as quickly as the animals are drinking it, and as evaporation is taking place from the sun onto the water. So that can be a tough thing to combat. So these pumps will be ongoing. And when rainy season properly arrives, it should have arrived already. Then we might find that they'll switch the water pump off and not worry about it because you'll have the rainwater doing what needs to be done. So yeah, so if they do find that a certain area maybe has, say, something like high concentrations of this blue-green algae, the cyanobacteria, perhaps they try and close the water hole off. I'm not sure. I think every different reserve is going to have a different management strategy. So again, it's hard to put a blanket sort of tool around it. Would they drain it? Would I say put a fence around it? I have no idea what they would do here at Madikwe. But in the Sabi sand and in lots of ecosystems, cyanobacteria kills animals every single year, and all different animals, from elephants to predators, like you name it. So that can be something that's not so nice. And the story that I always tell, because it's from personal experiences, when I was guiding down in the southern Sabi sand, and it was a waterhole, or is a waterhole, right in front of the lodge that I was working at. And I was there during the big droughts in South Africa. And this was about 2015, when the drought was at its absolute worst. And there was pretty much no water around. There must have been about, just let this elephant finish splashing. I don't know, there must have been about 30 or 40 hippos now decided to make use of this water hole because there was just nothing there. And can you imagine a relatively small water hole? It's probably about 4 times the size of this water hole that we're looking at now. Um, Urine, feces, just disaster. And what we started to see is all the catfish, all the barbel, and other fish species were dying. So there just wasn't enough oxygen in the water anymore. And that was quite hectic. Obviously, we got a strong smell of rotting fish, and I mean, hippos don't even smell great at the best of times. And what they essentially did is once the hippos left the water in the evening, they just put a small electric fence around it, so probably about knee high, so that other animals, if they needed to, can still step over it and drink water. But they needed to shift the hippos out, and hippos can't jump. And then they went round and they try to remove as many of the dead fish as possible, and then just let that water hole restore itself once again. You can imagine if fish and things were dying, there would have probably been high concentrations of all sorts of types of bacteria, and none of the little microorganisms that would be living in there would be doing very well. So that's just an example of what was done there. And I forget how long it was that they closed it off, and then eventually they opened it up, and everything was back to normal. But it's almost that time where the AFRI cameras will join us, which is exciting. Means we'll have a few more water holes to visit. And in just a moment, we could potentially head over to Tau, which is a camera further north in Madikwe from Jamala. We could head over to Naledi, which is in Olifants West Game Reserve, as well as Rosie's Pan. And even there's some action happening up in Kenya. We could always pop in to Old Donyo. So I hope that you're excited for those additions of the cameras. And remember, this is live and interactive, so you can keep on sending your questions through to us.